Hello friends, today I'm gonna show you game 5 and game 6 of the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Let's start with the game 5. Jan Nepomniachtchi was playing white, and once again he decided to start the game with e4. Actually, I expect to see this move in all of his games, maybe except one game. I still believe that once he gonna try c4, but okay, this game he decided not to change something. e4, e5, and Carlsen feels himself comfortable with e5. He's okay with Ruy Lopez defense. So third time in this match we see this opening when Jan playing white and Carlsen and Magnus playing black. So there is not much to explain here, just Ruy Lopez defense. And they had this position in game 3 of the match. And here Magnus went for rook b8, deviating first. A takes b5, a takes b5. h3, always a useful move. d6 and c3. White's idea to play d4 and having opportunity to take back with c3 pawn, so having pawn center, not playing d4 here, after which black is fine after just taking on d4, and that's it. So c3, b4, reducing number of pawns. Basically it's a good thing for black, and probably d4 doesn't give anything to white, just because of taking on c3 first, and then maybe even taking on d4 or something else. Just not much to play here. So white played d3, b takes c3 still, c3, and d5. One of the possible options. Knight d2, d takes e4, d takes e4, bishop d6, queen c2, h6, knight f1. Until this moment, game was more or less okay. White's plan was to develop some of his pieces, and black almost did the same. So there is not much going on. Actually, like Jan wasn't able to get anything in all 3 white games. So like even any small advantage. And okay, maybe this is his strategy for the match, like trying something, and then maybe in case if Magnus will make a mistake, then he gonna use it. Although obviously speaking, it's hard to get something against such an experienced player as Magnus Carlsen. And this game he got a small chance at least to make some pressure, but he didn't use it. So if like okay, here it's black to move, and what would you play here? Actually, black was perfectly fine after bishop d7, just developing one of the last pieces and then doing something else. But Magnus decided to do similar thing as white immediately. I mean, transferring the knight to g6 as white, similar as white. So he went for knight e7, knight g3, knight g6, and bishop e3. But suddenly with this maneuver, with knight e7, knight g6, he lost some time, and now he's no longer has time to do something slow here. The problem that, let's say, if we try something like bishop d7 here, just like making just normal developing move. Then white always has idea of c4, c5 and grabbing some space on the queen side. And this is kind of annoying thing for black. And good question, what else to do? Because developing this bishop to e6 makes no sense. Then white just takes, white just take on e6, doubling the pawns for black. So it's definitely not an option. Okay, it's funny that engine recommends, one of the engine recommendation here is queen e7 move, but it's a big question who gonna play such a move because of knight f5, and it's not clear what to do. So that's why Magnus went for probably smart decision, queen e8. Now knight f5 is not a problem, and his idea to play like maybe at some point to play bishop e6. And here it was a critical moment of this game, because after moving the game, which was rook d1, nothing for white, and position is pretty equal. Also, it's funny, like some commentators, they say that Jan had great chances in this game in case if he would play c4 move here. So it's funny in terms that actually c4 gives some, let's say, not small advantage, something a bit higher, but some advantage for white. But still, it's black's position is solid, and okay, white is better, but it's a long game still. So I mean, it's really not something exciting about this game. Even if white would play c4, okay, he gets advantage after this move, but still you play against Magnus Carlsen, and definitely you need something more to win a game against him. And in the game, after rook d1, bishop e6, now it's too late to play c4 because simply queen c6 and black is perfectly fine. So that's why he played bishop a4, but now bishop d7, no problems for black, in fact. Knight d2, bishop a4, queen takes a4, queen takes a4, rook takes a4, rook a8, trading one pair of the rooks, x takes, and rook b8. And okay, let's make one more move, rook a6, like making some pressure on this bishop, having in mind knight f5 idea, knight c4 idea. And it's good moment to stop for a while. It seems like white is better because, especially because of this difference between the bishops. But sometimes it happens like bad bishop is actually not that bad, and good bishop is actually not that good. So this is not exactly that case, but black is fine. He has like he doesn't have some weaknesses that white can use. So let's see what happened. Simply knight e8, overprotecting this bishop on d6, king f1, and knight f8. And black's plan is quite simple, to put his pawn to f6, protecting e5 pawn, put his knight to e6, and that's it. And asking white what he gonna do next, how you gonna try to break through. Actually, black has a very solid position. Knight f5, knight e6, knight c4, rook d8, 6, yes, g4, like creating some activity, h4, knight d6, trading one pair of the knights, knight takes, bishop takes, and h5. And white's position looks really nice, but the problem, he cannot do anything. Actually, he cannot make any progress here. Maybe if we would be able to trade the knights and the rooks, then this bishop would be better than this one. Even there, also it's still, I think, good chances for black to survive. I mean, maybe it's even not good chances to survive, but just draw and fortress for black, because it's very hard to attack something. That's why just they did some more moves and agreed for draw. And so bishop f8, rook a5, king e8, rook d5, rook a8, rook d1, and they went for repetition because really it's hard to do something. G7 pawn is very well protected, C7 pawn is protected as well, and what else to do? White cannot make any king walk, because also this is, for example, another good point to mention, what I told you about good and bad bishop. In fact, if white would make some inaccuracy here, then at some point it's easy to grab all his pawns, like f3, then e4 falls, g4 falls, and so on. So yes, this bishop is, I mean, e3 bishop is good in terms of like he has a lot of squares to go and so on. But on the other hand, there are some pawns that cannot be protected by this bishop, and sometimes we can see such examples. Then bad bishop is actually not that bad. It's a good defender, and good bishop is not that good because it's bad defender. So in terms of this game, we can say that after c4 on move 20, white will get some advantage. Also, still game goes on. It's nothing special. So what can I say about this game? That it wasn't really exciting. More or less normal draw. Game 6 of the match, and finally we have a decisive game. Magnus Carlsen won a game against Jan Nepomniachtchi with white pieces, and it took him just 136 moves to do that. Let's see what happened and what went wrong for Jan Nepomniachtchi. Magnus Carlsen was playing white. He went d4. I think it's a really good choice. And then we got some kind of Catalan position, also not exactly Catalan. And here, if white would play c4, we get well-known Catalan opening, which was played in one of the games. But Magnus went for b3, which is, we can say, well-known as nothing for white. Not a popular move. Black went c5, d takes, bishop takes, c4, d takes, c4, queen c2, queen e7, protecting the bishop on c5, knight d2, temporarily sacrificing a pawn. In case of c takes d3, white would get nice initiative. So that's why black just went for knight c6, knight c4, and b5. Aggressive move. Probably it was okay to do something like bishop d7. Also in this case, probably after bishop b2, white has small pressure, so probably Jan decided to solve the problems in a very concrete way, and the move is okay. White is forced to play knight e5. Now we have knight b4 attacking the queen, forcing white to play queen b2 since there are not so many good squares for the queen. Bishop b7, a3, knight c6, knight d3, bishop b6, and bishop g5. Rook d8, bishop takes f6. Yeah, probably queen takes f6 was a decent option. In the game it was pawn takes f6, which is also okay. Rook a to c1, so just developing another piece. knight d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes, queen a2, bishop takes g2, king takes g2, queen b7 check, king g1, queen e4, and finally we can make our first stop and to understand what happened. This position we can call more or less typical for Catalan style positions. White has this good knight on d3, which is really hard to kick away. Black has not that great bishop on d4, and I would say white is slightly better, but it would be much better for him to have this pawn on a2 instead of a3. In this case, these pawns on b3 and a2 like really good, and in this case, white really has some chances to get something out of this position. With this pawn on a3, b3, it's somehow not that comfortable. So queen c2, a5, rook d1, king g7, rook d2. Not much going on. White has plus of his pawn structure, and for example, some endgames, let's say knight against bishop, and maybe knight plus rook against bishop and rook. These endgames are in white's favor. And here black has different opportunities. One of them is just to play b4. There are some other opportunities, and I would say this is one of the important moments of the game. I don't really like black's decision to play rook c8, allowing white to take on c8 and going for this position, 2 rooks versus queen. Yes, we can say, like knowing what happened later, we can say that black was okay, it was no problem for him. But on the other hand, it's definitely white who is playing for something here, and white is playing without any risk, comparing to black who has to be careful. Queen d5 attacking the b3 pawn. That's why b4, a4, e3, bishop e5, h4. h5 is also a question if black needs to do this move, but okay, king h2. Now black found this tactical resource bishop b2. Rook takes b2 is not really great for white, because then queen d3, and always there is problem with pawn on a3. So that's why white went for rook c5 attacking the queen, queen d6. And this is first critical point of the game where Magnus missed a great opportunity to win the game. He could have played rook c2, bishop a3, knight f4, and then the point is that next white will be able to place his rooks to the 7th rank and creating serious problems for the black king. And according to the engine, this position is winning for white. The problem for Magnus, it was that he was low on time, so like it's not that obvious opportunity, and that's why he went for rook d1, missing his first chance to win this game. After bishop a3, rook b5, queen d7, rook c5, some why Jan decided not to take the pawn on b4. After that, he is just fine. Probably no winning chances for black, of course, but no problems on the other hand. Somehow he went for e5, and after rook c2, queen d5, rook d2, queen b3, rook e4 attacking the knight, knight c5, queen b4. We got second critical position, where once again Magnus missed his second winning chance. If he would play rook c2 after f5, knight takes a4, white has great winning chances. Because idea that after queen a4 there is rook c3, taking back the piece, and then all these weaknesses is really not something easy to protect. In the game it was knight takes e4, but suddenly after queen b3, rook c2, bishop f8, black is okay. But there is one important thing I should tell it right now, that actually I don't really like Jan's idea about playing rook c8, because he went for position with problems in long term. Like it's really hard. Like this position now we have on the board, it's move 41. In the game it was 136 moves. So imagine a player who protecting during such a long time. Of course, it's like at some point, till some moment, he had it still was draw. But since it's really hard to protect such position for such a long time, being a human, then it's not surprise he did a mistake. Another point that actually Magnus is well known for his technical skills, like he's great endgame player, and it makes no sense to go for such positions. So let's see what happened next. Knight c5, queen b5, knight d3, a3, knight f4, queen 5, rook a2, b4, rook d3. Yes, black has a passed pawn, but actually this passed pawn is not dangerous at all, and it's easy to stop. Then king h6, rook d1, queen a4, rook a1, bishop d6, king g1, queen b3, and finally transferring the knight, since it's only one piece that can be improved. Knight e2, queen d3, knight d4, king h7, king h2. And maybe here it was also important moment. Maybe it was better not to give white such a chance of taking on a3 by playing queen e4. After queen e4, rook takes a3, very interesting idea. In the game it was queen h4. In case of bishop takes a3, rook takes a3. Actually, maybe black is in time to push f5, f4, creating problems of pawn structure for white. Because otherwise, it's funny thing that white can easily place his rook to f5, then maybe to f4, where it's perfectly protected. Then somehow maneuver his knight to maybe d5 square or e4 square, attacking f6 pawn, and then start taking pawn by pawn, just taking on f6, then taking on f7, then taking h5 pawn, and having easy winning position. So that's why black went for queen h4, which was perfectly fine. King g1, queen e4. Now rook a4, placing rook to the 4th rank, which is very important because like somehow stopping h4 idea. Bishop e5, knight e2, attacking the queen. Queen c2, rook a2. King g2, queen d5, check. And the problem for white that his king is not that safe anymore without this pawn on h4. So that's why he went for f3, which is also not something great, because anyway it's weakening white king. But on the other hand, it's hard to get rid of checks. So he went for f3, queen d1, f4, bishop c7, king f2, bishop b6, rook a1, d3, rook e4. There is not much to comment on each of these moves. Basically, white is trying to organize his pieces in some good way to avoid all the possible problems for his king and attack, let's say, f7 pawn, which can be a target. Also, it's not something easy to do, because always, like, king on f2 is not that comfortable. So rook e8, f5, 8. And they just shuffling around. Bishop a5, threatening queen e1. Bishop b6, aiming e3 pawn. And still position, like during long time, position stayed as something close to equal. Queen h1, threatening queen h2 checks, or rook c1. Queen h2 is nothing for black, then simply king f3. Queen d5. And they just doing something. And so eventually white was able to place one of his rook to 7th rank, and another one can go to the 7th rank easily. Queen c2, rook b5, bishop a7, rook a5. And since it's always there is some pressure on e3 pawn and somewhere else, that's why he decided to try his chances in this position after rook f5, queen d3, attacking pawn on e3. White cannot make any of these move, because then still it will be bishop takes e3 and one of the rook will be hanging. So that's why rook f7, king f7, rook b7, king g6, rook a7. And now we got this position, which should be draw. But while I was waiting to start this recording, I thought it will be draw. But on the other hand, once again, I remind you, it's very difficult to play, to defend such a unpleasant position during long time. So that's why, no surprise, eventually Jan did a mistake that cost him a game. And for white, it's quite simple to play here. It's either win or draw, and he has no risk. So first he was just making some moves. We can like go here quickly without commenting much, because really maybe in 20 moves nothing changed. So he was trying to do something. The point for white is still to go e4 at some point. This is his only chance. He should go forward. He should push his pawns. And at some point he was able to do that. Let's see how it happened. Yes, he placed his knight to e2. So this knight is protecting everything around. Actually, knight is very good defender against the queen, because it's covering many squares around. Queen b1 and finally e4. Finally a step forward. Probably in last something like 30 moves. So it's very unpleasant for like being black to wait while your opponent will go forward. Played h4, probably it's right decision. And then this position obviously should be a draw, but it's very hard to protect it, and being low on time, no time on your clock. For white it's quite easy. He just should try to push his pawns forward. For black, any inaccuracy would cost a game, and that's what happened. Somehow Magnus was able to organize his pieces in a good way. And then he just went forward with e5. And black's only chance is to give, try to give a perpetual check. Unfortunately for Jan, it didn't work. I mean, such a position in practical game, it's very hard to play, so no surprise. Knight h5, queen h7, and here nice trick with e6. Queen takes f5 is not possible because of knight g7 fork. He played queen g6. Now another powerful move, rook f7. In case of queen e6, knight g7, king takes, knight takes. we have winning pawn endgame for white, so that's why he played king d8, but after f5, queen g1, knight g7, game is over. e7 is coming. In case of, so black resigns. In case of, let's say, queen h1 check, king g5, white king has very nice square on g8, no checks, e7 is coming, so white is just winning. A very nice win by Magnus Carlsen, and very important win in terms of this match. And I think now it will be really hard for Jan Nepomniachtchi to revanche and to become world champion.